welcome to the Peers to Pillars podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Donnick, and this is a place where we talk about suicide. We share stories of suicide loss, stories of suicide attempt, a lot of talk about suicidal thoughts, and sometimes some combination of all of those experiences. Normally, this is where I would be introducing you to whoever's going to be joining me for the episode, but today we're going to try something different. It's just going to be me today. I thought it might be helpful to just take you behind the scenes a little bit as to how this podcast came about, why I started this podcast, and I always like that when I listen to podcasts, and sometimes it's a chance to get to know the host a little bit better if they do an episode like this where they take questions in from the audience, or again, just kind of like take you behind the scenes. I always enjoy that. I love learning more, and it's a great way to maybe connect on a different level with your host. So I'm trying it out myself. I thought that might be helpful for you. I already get so many questions from people as to the why and the how did this come about. So I thought that might be maybe refreshing, maybe, if anyone is curious, kind of take you back to square one and how this began. And, but also, as you're listening to this episode and to any episode, and if you have any questions that pop up, please do send them my way. It's been really helpful for me to hear from you all, to, know where are some of the blanks that maybe I've been working in this space a long time, so I sometimes don't remember where to back up, where do I need to bridge the gap to help meet you where you are at. So it's really useful to me to hear from you, and so please keep that coming, and we'll just jump right in, and we'll see how this goes, and hopefully it'll be a good one, and maybe this will be something that we do every once in a while as questions stack up. But, just like I said, how and why did I decide to start a podcast where we're sharing stories of suicide? And, really it's just, I guess partly the idea really started to pop into my mind. As I mentioned, I've worked in this space a long time, this space being suicide prevention and suicide support for folks who have lost a loved one to suicide. I've been in this space for, I guess, about 15 years now. I am in the New York City area. I'm in Brooklyn, and have been here for 15 years. I'm originally from Wisconsin, and so pretty much started working in suicide prevention, suicide support for lost survivors right when we moved here. And I had the opportunity to work for two different nonprofits, one really small and one really large. And so that gave me great experience, just a little bit about nonprofit world, but also it really, in both cases, my job specifically had me connecting with those who have experienced suicide loss. And so I would, through different roles and for different reasons, I would often spend a lot of time on the phone just talking with people and hearing their stories. Whether it was, I worked pretty intensely with a lot of volunteers in the peer space, so meaning suicide loss survivors who were volunteering to support other suicide loss survivors. I also, in my time, facilitated some support groups, so I would sometimes be talking to people to hear their story before they attended the support group. And so it just, over the years, I can't even tell you how many loss survivors I spoke to, and I was always moved, and it struck me how much I learned from them, how much, and as you're having conversations like that, so often you just, as you're listening to someone, you start to draw comparisons where I would realize there were themes that indicated, common experiences or just general experiences for all loss survivors, but also times when the experience was unique, right? So often, it was always so interesting to me, and often interesting to the other person. And many times this would be their first time sharing their story, and it's when you describe an experience, that you verbalize that experience, that can really kind of take you through it in a different way. So they would be having their own sort of revelations as they were sharing their story with me. I'm learning so much as I'm listening to them. And I started finding myself even just saying out loud to the person, like, how is it that it's this conversation that is so, incredible and moving and magical? How is it that we're the only two getting the chance to experience it or, live it? And it just felt to me like it would be really important to share. I just wished that there were times when someone else was able to hear, especially if, I would just have this really incredible connection with one person, and I would have to talk, I would have another call scheduled right after. And as I'm talking to that person, I could notice things that would have been helpful for them to hear from the other lost survivor that I had just been talking to, but there was no way for me to put them together. And so that's where I really started thinking about how helpful it could be for people to just be able to listen to someone else's story. Because really, in this space in this case, meaning support for people who've experienced suicide loss and suicide attempt, it is unfortunately because the connecting with someone else who has a similar experience, because that is going to be so powerful. I mean, it truly is. When you have, gone through this, losing anyone we love to death is devastating in so many ways. But when we lose someone to cancer, when we lose someone to, any type of death that maybe was, there was a lead up, there was a build up to that illness, or, losing someone to old age. These are things that we have a chance to start to prepare for. And it's it's certainly still going to be, we're going to be faced with that ache. We're going to be missing that person. We're going to grieve them. But there was, it was something that we were able to prepare for. Suicide is so abrupt in many ways. Certainly there can be cases where perhaps there was a very long, drawn-out battle with mental illness leading up to that. But many times it can be abrupt, and the real weight behind it can be just the fact that there was intent, on the person's behalf, to take their life. And so there's just losing someone to suicide is just so much more complicated. And quite frankly, we know it's stigmatized in our society. So it's a lot to carry. Or again, just losing someone, grieving someone is a lot to carry. And then to add to that, the unique nuances of losing someone to suicide, it's a lot. And so when you, for the first time, are able to connect with another loss survivor, whether it's at a support group or through some sort of one-on-one outreach program, the experience is just amazing. Quite frankly, it's the first time that someone may feel understood completely, that they can take the mask off. They don't have to be worrying about protecting the person that they're talking to. And so that experience is absolutely incredible. That is magical, and something I feel very passionate about, that it's so helpful to your own healing to be able to connect with someone who gets you in that way. But I realize that it's asking you, the loss survivor, to take on quite a bit in putting yourself out there. And so that was another thing that I just started thinking about, of like, we know, we meaning those of us who have been here, have been in this space, have been able to have had that experience of meeting with someone else whose experience is similar, and to realize like, wow, you really know what I'm talking about. I don't have to, you can kind of fall into a shorthand when you're talking to someone who, gets it. And so when you're feeling so isolated or, othered in all of the spaces that you occupy, at work or even in your family, even amongst your friends, when you're able to meet with someone and feel that connection right away, it's wonderful. But it's asking you to put yourself out there, right? It's asking you to connect with a stranger, and for the first time, like that can be pretty intimidating. And especially when you're already carrying this grief, you're already, taking care of yourself in this space that it's hard right now. Like you're grieving, and there's so much to do. So we know that it's a big ask. We just, when we've experienced it, we know it's worth it, but you might not know that. And it is, I'm someone who, I'm a more extroverted person, and I really do. I enjoy connecting with people. I take a lot from that, and so, but I'm aware that for someone who's more shy and introverted, again, it's going to be a bigger lift, a bigger ask for them to take this on. So that's where, again, I would often think about like, what could we do? Like, there's got to be something we could do to take a layer off, and somehow, how can we bring this support to someone, even make it even easier for them? And so again, that's where I was like, finally it just like hit me one day. I was like, I need to create this podcast, because now I'm not asking you to do anything other than just listen to me. And maybe that's, an ask in itself, a weight in itself, but hopefully this will be helpful. And I'm picturing, I guess, again, I'm in New York, so I do a lot of walking around town, and that's when I'm listening to my own podcasts, and it's just, you put on your headphones just like this, and you're just walking down the street, and you're able to really just like, listen to whoever's talking, listen to these people's stories. And so I really hope that can be the experience for you. I hope that we'll have folks on who are just going to kind of walk us through their own story. And, with suicide, what we find, what we know is that it doesn't discriminate against anyone. So it can be all different ages, all different races, all different genders. Everyone has been affected by suicide in some way. And also just there's even diversity in the experience of the process, right? So sometimes people will reach out and look for support immediately. Other times people might take time on their own for a long time before they reach out for support. And that support can look very different. For some, it might be therapy, it might be group therapy, it might be, support groups right away. Other times, it might be something different. It might be that they're doing, maybe they go through their own self-care process. So, that's where I encourage folks to listen and take what serves you and leave behind what doesn't. You never know what is going to be that thing that really, really helps. And so, I do often encourage folks to try different elements. Particularly, you'll hear me talk a lot about support groups and therapy, just because those, kind of going back to what I was saying about just what happens when you're describing your own experience, when you're verbalizing a story, it truly does help you process. And so it is so helpful. So you will hear me talk a lot about trying out support groups and trying out therapy. And I understand that we're all different. So it's not going to be a one size fits all. So just because I really enjoy therapy and support groups doesn't mean that it will work for you as well. But I just think it's helpful to try and helpful to try a couple times, especially for something like a support group, because every time you go to a support group, it's going to be a different group of people, right? Even though maybe you always have the same, 10 or so people, there's going to be people who drop in and drop out. So each time you're going to have a different group of humans in that room. And so just like different things are going to come up. So I always say, if you don't like the first support group you go to, just try at least one more, just to see. And the same, therapy can be a lot more complicated. And we'll try to get more, there's been a couple times that I've just had mental health professionals on, so we do get into the nitty-gritty a little bit more, and we'll probably always be talking about that, because I know what a challenge it is to not only find a personality that you vibe with, but therapy is expensive and it's not always covered by insurance, so there will be some links that I will share in the show notes that certainly I do hope is helpful to get you started on that path. But again, if you have any questions specifically about therapy, support groups, any of this, please do reach out to me. Again, I do my best to help you find your own place wherever you are located. But yeah, so that's my hope. My hope is that that you'll be able to, just by listening to people share their stories, again, as I mentioned, there are some things that are universal in the grieving world, and especially in the suicide bereavement space. There will be some experiences that are similar for all. And then there's going to be times that everybody has their own unique spin. So that's what I'm hoping, is that, you're, as a new loss survivor, or a new attempt survivor, that you'll be able to listen, and hopefully it brings a little bit of that feeling of connection when you're listening to someone describe something that you're like, oh wow, that was me too. And then again, you might hear something that doesn't land at all for you, because we're all different. So those are the things that don't worry about taking on anything that doesn't fit or feel good. And so all of this so far, I really have been focusing on the suicide loss experience, because that, for me professionally, that really was where I spent the bulk of my career, was working with suicide loss survivors. But I always thought to myself, when I saw a support group, when I was facilitating a support group for suicide loss survivors, and when I was working in spaces where we had peer volunteers for suicide loss survivors, I thought it could be replicated for suicide attempt survivors as well. We actually, just anecdotally, the Venn diagram of the suicide loss survivor and the suicide attempt survivor is often, there's often a lot of overlap. So I just felt that it would be a good place to start, at least to offer similar support systems for both. So that is why on this podcast you will hear stories from both. And I will talk a lot about Pillar, which is the nonprofit that I formed along with this podcast, where we do offer peer support for both suicide loss and suicide attempt survivors. Like I said, I just really felt that that there could be a good place for support for both groups, and looking at that power of that peer connection, when when the similarities of the two experiences are that feeling that I kind of was describing earlier, of that feeling of almost having to put on a mask when you go to work, or when you're with friends, when you're with people who are outside of the experience, who haven't experienced a suicide attempt, who haven't experienced losing a loved one to suicide. They, if they care about you, they do want to support you. They want to do the best that they can to support you, but they don't get it. And, sometimes people can say the most well-meaning things that are going to hurt you. And, only because, we used to do this all the time in the support group that I was with, that we would often make time to just share things that people said that things like people will often say things like, everything happens for a reason, which is it just doesn't fall well. I don't know that it falls well, honestly, at any point. That's probably another discussion, but, certainly when we're talking about suicide, it doesn't feel good to hear that. And so these were things that we would share a lot. And so again, it just feels like this could be a place where you can take off the mask. You don't have to be hiding who you are, how you're feeling for the day. And so again, I'm not a mental health professional. Now I can kind of we'll shift into the portion of the episode where we'll talk about who I am a little bit more. I'm not a mental health professional. This is literally just me starting this podcast based on my own experience in talking with all of you, talking with people who have lived through this. And I just feel like what I can do is be that connector, be that person who kind of tries to bring you all together to meet each other and connect with each other. And that's where like I said, I just really feel like there's so much power there. And I feel very strongly about that this is a place that in the past seems to have been an afterthought. That was something that I would hear a lot from folks who have the lived experience of being the person who lost the loved one or being the person who survived the attempt, that they can sometimes feel that they were pushed aside or forgotten, or maybe just weren't the focus of, of the support systems and of the, prevention resources that were available. And so I just felt like let's go ahead and create a space where we're really elevating and learning from those who have experienced it. So I always say I don't have any letters after my name, which is why you'll notice that I lean heavily on those who are. I work a lot with clinicians, a lot with therapists. They are the ones who have the training, and we do need to rely on them when we're dealing with, often what can lead to suicidal thoughts can be mental health conditions. And certainly after losing someone, that trauma, we know that can bring on PTSD. And so these are things that you do need to speak to a mental health professional. It might not be lifelong, it might be temporary, but it's important to speak to that professional who really will guide you through it, who can get you some medication, that will help you and guide you through that. So I always say, it's important to have that mental health professional, that medical opinion, let's whatever they tell us to do, let's do that. But it's a different dynamic. Again, it's a different dynamic than being able to talk to a peer. And so that's where I think it's so important to have both. And why, as I said, I feel that I have learned so much from these conversations, so much from the community that I just really wanted to create that space for you all too. So that's kind of where I see myself as the person who's just kind of, being the one to connect you all with each other. I'm definitely part of the community myself. I talk a lot about, not a lot, I don't know. I mean, I talk a lot. First of all, I talk a lot, period. You'll notice that. But I do talk often about the fact that I lost my grandma to suicide when I was 13. And I came from a family where we didn't talk about it. It happened. We never, ever acknowledged it. And so growing up in that world really put my own healing and my own experience with the death and with suicide and with mental health. It really put it all on hold until I became an adult and started sort of noticing things. Probably the first time I really started to kind of take in what the world experience and reflect back on what the place that I grew up in, and how that was different was I used to work in state politics when I lived in Wisconsin, and I was working for a woman who's very passionate about mental health parity, something that especially in those northern states, they often really struggle with, just because seasonal affective disorder and depression and so many mental health conditions can certainly be aggravated by the lack of light in like places like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan. So I was working for a woman who was really passionate about focusing on that and doing what she could for her constituents. And so all of a sudden, she was working with a lot of clinicians, a lot of therapists, kind of just asking them to weigh in on what she could do, what needed to be done to help folks. And so that was actually the first time when I was like talking with some of these professionals, I started thinking about, just what my childhood had been like. And that's where, I've often thought it would have been helpful, to have had some support, and to be able to have to be able to talk about it. I'm a talker, which is again, probably, what worked out for me to start this podcast and also have all these conversations. I really do enjoy talking with people. And, so anyways, I definitely have been a little bit more outspoken about losing my grandma. I also lost a friend. He was a dear, very close friend in high school. It was years later that he died by suicide. So I have those two personal experiences. I also do have my own personal experience of suicide attempt and suicidal ideation, which I will at some point go into. I've been talking with some people about like, who will I have one day to come on the podcast to be the person who interviews me. So this is, I don't share that to make this about me, but I do share it so that you know that I am someone who gets it too. I don't want, I know a lot of times the concern, the trepidation to reaching out is, none of us want to be judged, especially if we've already been in a situation where we feel that someone's judging us, right? If we've already, maybe we've started to open up about our experience with suicide loss or suicide attempt to coworkers or to friends or family members, and we've felt that they, that they judged us, especially, you can tell when you're talking to someone and they are looking at you in a different way now. Like you can tell when everything has shifted, and this was something big. This was something, I shared this with them. They weren't prepared to handle it. And now our relationship is going to be different. So I know that that's something that we don't ever want to experience that again, right? So the only reason I share is so that you know that I'm not going to do that. I'm not judging you. In fact, I actually really get it. And even if I personally haven't lived through what you've lived through, because as I keep saying, we all have our unique nuances that kind of color our own experiences in a different way. I most likely have heard someone already say this. I share that with folks a lot just because I really do. Feel like I have kind of heard everything at some point. As a secondary anecdote, I worked for a few years as a volunteer on a suicide crisis line. And I often tell folks that I wish that was something that we all did, because it really does, it really helps you connect with every single person. And it helps you find compassion for every person, every story, every experience. You realize there are always things that led someone to that point. And so it really made me like a good person when I was in that space to really be able to take that training, and apply it better to my everyday life. Now I'm like out of practice, but I still will always, there's really nothing that shocks me when I hear it. So, I'm eager to listen to everyone's story, and I'm eager to elevate those stories. But I do, I should maybe this is helpful to put this here, because I've already encountered this a little bit when talking with people who I've wanted to interview for this podcast, is that if you're a little bit shy about a certain part of your story, we only need to share what feels best for you. And so I know that can be, it is an interesting experience. Because I've been, working in this arena for 15 years. There's a lot of people that I've worked with for almost that whole time. So I know there's some people that I connect with over and over, and I see over and over, and I've seen them share their story. And so I was a little surprised when I would invite them to come on the podcast in this way, and they were a little bit more shy about it. And so, again, I do want to share with you all that if you're listening and you're thinking, oh, I would love to do that. I'd love to share my story in that way, but I'm afraid of sharing this one piece or this part or whatever. We don't have to give away the whole farm every single time we talk. Even the podcast itself should probably only be about an hour. And so if you could imagine that to share your whole story, it could get really long. So we don't have to do all of that. I don't know if this is making any sense. I just want to help folks know that there's space for you, in sharing as much or as little. You could be listening and thinking, I would never do that. I want to listen to these stories, but I'd never want to share my own story. That's fine too, because that's why we're making this. So, okay, so let's see. So what else should I say about myself? That's clearly I'm a talker. Clearly, I'm passionate about you all. I'm passionate about this space and making a spot for people to feel safe. That's really what it is. I want people to feel safe. I want people to feel that they can be who they are, that they can be themselves, because we do need to create a community for ourselves, because of the fact that it really can be a lifelong journey. What you'll find with suicide loss is, something we talk about a lot is every subsequent death, you'll find that it lands a little bit different. And I say that, every subsequent death, not just every next suicide loss, but you may find that it could be years even. It could be years after you lost your loved one to suicide, that you lose someone in a different way. And it can sometimes stir up emotions that you didn't realize were there or were still there, were ongoing, about losing your loved one to suicide. You may also find that it may not, some deaths are going to land a little bit differently. So, but that's something that we all, we notice as life goes on. Sometimes people can think that maybe people like myself who are immersed in this world of suicide and grief and bereavement, honestly, it can come across as a bit of a downer, but that is life. We are, as beautiful as life is, we are constantly coming across loss, because we are always going to be losing someone else. And I'm talking about death specifically, but we know after, these past few years of going through the pandemic and coming back out of it and the world changing, we know that we can experience grief not just because of death, but because of anything coming to a close. So all of that, you may find that as life goes on, things that maybe on paper don't seem related in any way to your suicide loss may activate it in a different way. And so you'll notice that you'll maybe at certain points need to restart. Maybe if you haven't been in therapy for a while, you might want to reach out, find a therapist again, or reach out to your old therapist. You might suddenly need to go to a support group. So it's important to build this community where we can support each other, to remind each other of those things. And then for suicide attempt survivors, that's also, it can be a lifelong recovery. You may, have moments where you might have years where things quiet down, where you're maybe not finding that suicidal thoughts are taking over your life in a way that they once did. And then all of a sudden, as our lives are always shifting. And so maybe you're someone who stays in a mental health routine. And so you've always got your pattern ready, to you know exactly the tools to reach for. But sometimes some of us might just put that away for a while. And so when it's time to restart, it might be that we need to have others around us that we can trust, that we can feel safe with, to help, you know, guide us through. So that's really something that I'm hoping to be able to do here, is that we build our community just in folks, you know, listening to this podcast on a regular basis, where, you know, we would love to be able to create space for us to all connect and take care of each other. So that kind of, I guess that really ties into more of the how and the why that this started, and more of the who the heck am I to be the one to connect you all. Let's see, what else can I share? I have 2 black cats who've been kind of roaming around at my ankles as I'm talking with you all today. I definitely, something I do want to share too is, because I've noticed, I know it comes through on this podcast, it's something I think about a lot in this space, is I'm a very enthusiastic person who laughs a lot. And I share that because I know, especially as I do a lot of speaking, but the podcast really is the first time that I've my voice has been recorded, and that it just kind of lives on. And that was definitely an adjustment for me, because I usually speak off the cuff pretty much all the time. Whenever I'm presenting, I'm usually just kind of just see what comes out. And that has worked for me. I feel that it helps me, you know, again, connect with the unique circumstances of the room that I'm presenting in at the time. But that means I've never had to listen to it back. And so what I know now is that I worry sometimes that I'm maybe coming across a little bit too jovial, and I know that people tuning in may be finding this, you know, immediately after a loss or immediately after an attempt. And so I guess I'll put this here. I'll try not to bring this up in every episode, but that is who I am. I am someone who, as I mentioned, I'm a people person, so I get very excited to talk with people. And my way of coping with my own stuff is honestly a lot of self-deprecating humor. I really do like to make fun of myself, and I think it's hilarious. And so even on my worst days, even in my darkest moments, I often still find a way to laugh too. That's, to me, the duality of life, is that things can be awful and hilarious. Again, I realize that's not for everyone, so I will do what I can to try to hold myself back. And if you can believe it, you actually are watching me trying to hold myself back. Something that I often thought about was, or what I first really noticed this about myself and really put a lot of thought into pulling myself back, was when I was facilitating the support group. I would get so happy to see the people who came, the attendees. We met every other week, and I would just be so happy to see them. And because you get to know these people really well, especially folks who are attending, you know, on a regular basis for, you know, a year or two. I would be so happy to see them, but I knew that I really had to tell myself to you know, stop smiling so much, because obviously they're probably seeing that support group as something that is important, certainly, but probably not something that they're happy about. I don't know. We did actually have a lot of fun, so maybe I'm worrying about this too much, but I'm just going to put that out there. I will. I do laugh a lot. I do smile a lot. I can't help it. I'm excited to talk to you all. But I will try to hold that back. The other thing that you may notice that is something that I'm definitely working on is I stutter a lot. I trip over my words a lot. I'm an overthinker, so my mind is usually operating, you know, so fast, so far ahead of me that my mouth just can't keep up. So I wish that I was a smoother speaker, but so far I'm not. I appreciate you all, your patience as I kind of trip through this. I definitely, when I decided I wanted to start this podcast, I was like, how hard can it be? Boys do it. And it turns out it's definitely a little bit harder than I expected. So I appreciate you all, kind of living through some of these growing pains with me. And I really feel like we're going to get there. I feel very passionate about this, as I've already mentioned. I'm so glad you all are here. I really am. I'm so glad you're here. Like I mentioned, I love hearing from you about, what you do like about the podcast, what you have questions on, what you're hoping to see more of. And I promise you, we have a lot of really good stuff coming up. And so let's see, what else can I share? Perhaps, share that the thinking behind the name of the podcast, Peers to Pillars, is something that we came up with when we were thinking about this, was because, I guess that's what I've often seen in this community, is that we, you reach out, you say you're interested in meeting with a peer, and that person is initially a stranger. You're talking to someone who has, similar experience, but, more experience. They're able to talk with you, help you share your story. They're able to say, yeah, me too. They're able to give you that validation, with, that you're in the right space, that you're, they're connecting with your personal story. And then they're also able to kind of point you towards next steps of, where do I go next with this? I've never, what do I do now that I lost my loved one? We just had the funeral. What do I do next? Or, I just got out of the hospital after my attempt. What do I do next? How do I integrate this into my life? So being able to talk to that peer, who was a perfect stranger initially, what we find is, after having this strong connection, and maybe, even sharing a little bit, usually it's like that first conversation, and then sharing a few resources back and forth by email or text, pretty soon you realize this peer is a pillar that I can rely on as you integrate this experience into your life. And so, that's what I hope. I keep saying the same thing over and over, but it's true. I really hope that what I think of that person, when I think of the loss survivor or attempt survivor who's feeling so alone, who, this is a new experience to them. And my hope is that the first step would be listening to the podcast and hearing these stories, and starting to feel, just by listening, feeling less alone. And then perhaps that'll give them, the bravery that they need to reach out and say, hey, I'd actually like to talk with one of these volunteers. And so then our volunteer can have a conversation with them and encourage them to maybe try attending a support group, or looking into different therapy places, and maybe sharing a book or a website that can offer even more validation or information. Just learning about all of this might be helpful. So that's my hope. My hope is that, it is going to be an ongoing process to heal, to move forward. But I hope that between this podcast and between Pillar and between so many other resources that are out there, I'm just naming, the ones that I happen to know the most because I'm working on these, but there are so many solid organizations that are providing very similar support that I connect with, that we all work with hand in hand. And so, it's hard to find all of it, right? It's hard. It's so difficult. This is a topic that, because people are so uncomfortable with, it's not front and center. And so that's where it's just really difficult to find the support that you need. And so we really want to be able to do that for you, to put you in touch with where you need to go, and when we can all together can continue moving forward. So So there you go. I guess I hope that was helpful. I'm really glad you're here. I really do love to see you all here. I'm looking forward to a lot of the conversations that are coming up. This is hard. This is really hard stuff. So I do, again, I especially not having a guest here with me today has kind of, I may be coming across a little bit more, I don't know, whimsical, because I guess that is kind of who I am. So I don't, I hope that what I can provide for you is that duality that I mentioned, that that life can be heavy and hilarious, that that your heart can be breaking and your heart can be filling with additional love. Life is complicated. It's a wild ride. And so, I definitely don't, just because I am today not, weeping, it's not that I don't know that you may be. And so I hope that it can come across that I do want to meet you wherever you are. And I hope that we'll cry together, but I also hope we'll laugh together too. So, okay. It's really hard for me sometimes to wrap these up. I'm just going to go ahead and close it here, I guess, because that was probably mostly what I kind of wanted to talk about today, just to kind of give you a little bit more insight into what this is. And we should be having our next guest up next week. So stay tuned. Please, 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 wherever you're listening to this, wherever you're watching this, please do what you can to like it, share this with as many people as you can think of that this would be helpful for. People are carrying suicidal thoughts and carrying their loved ones who they've lost to suicide privately more often than you would think. So please do share this around. I don't want people to feel that they have to carry this alone, because it's too much. No, there's too many things that we already are carrying alone. This shouldn't be it. I want people to know that they are not alone. There's a lot of us. There is a lot of us in this community. And so they don't have to feel alone. And so like this, subscribe, share, if you're seeing where you can rate and review, please give us, the top ratings. That will help us be found by folks, because that's ultimately the goal is, we can only support suicide loss and suicide attempt survivors if they have been able to find us. So I will finally hang up with this discussion today. I thank you so much for being here. I look forward to hearing from you. Please do reach out. Thank you so much. And please take care of yourselves.